Moving on now, India's IT and business services industry generated around US dollars 250 billion in revenue recently, and they employ over 5 million people. But the next leap will come from product innovation and deep tech.
Absolutely. In fact, our next speaker's perspective challenges conventional wisdom about how tech companies should be built and scaled. Sumit, in a geo-economic context where software is increasingly becoming more strategic and data sovereignty matters more than ever before, such domestic companies and products become even more important.
Absolutely. And you know, it's a very interesting thing. Ashish, if you remember earlier in the day when we spoke to the audience, there was a gentleman there who spoke about how we are so dependent on international IT products, whether it's Gmail, and he said Google, Gmail, WhatsApp, right? Well, our next speaker is Mr. Sridhar Vembu. He's the co-founder and chief scientist at Zoho Corporation. He's built a global SaaS company out of rural India, proving that world-class software products can be made in small-town India for global markets. A golden example of Make in India. It's our absolute pleasure to welcome on stage Mr. Sridhar Vembu to share his thoughts on powering IT innovation in India. Sir, if we can have you on stage, please. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Now it's on. So first, namaskaram to everyone and vanakkam, greetings. It's navigating geoeconomics, and within which I have to, the IT innovation. First, the landscape. We lived for 30 to 40 years under the Washington Consensus. That was 1991. That era started approximately after the Soviet collapse in India, and I think we can say that ended this year, the Washington Consensus. Because Washington Consensus also died in Washington, D.C. So, right? That's a fair way to say. And whenever these things happen, at the first we are in sort of deer in headlights. We don't know. First of all, we cannot accept that it has fully ended, right? We think maybe it will be patched together, maybe it can run for some more time, all of that. But I would bet against that. And the reason is there are too many structural forces that caused the end of Washington Consensus that's not one US election alone. In fact, I want to remind people that the so-called Trump tariffs on China were also continuing under the Biden administration. So there is actually a political consensus in America, independent of what you surface political difference. There is about China and a lot of that. And it was actually Biden administration that passed the USA CHIPS Act, which brought the Taiwanese fabs into America. Our US has declared pretty much that we will not buy the chips from there, you produce the chips here. Then I ask very respectfully, why shouldn't India do that? Why shouldn't we insist that the chips be made here, right? It's tech, the same kind of issues arise for us, national security, national sovereignty, all of that. It's not about just WhatsApp, right? It's about all of the technologies that in a global crisis could be weaponized against us, have shown to be weaponized against us. And so that's the landscape we are. In other words, technology is very much geopolitical now. And I can trace back why that happened. I'll briefly mention it. I've been observing this for 30 plus years. I am firmly in the camp of what, I'm a proud card-carrying member of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch. So I would consider myself a Swadeshi School of Economics. And I've always been, by the way, Swadeshi School of Economics. And the reason for that, I would outline is, I've been, studying Japan's economic emergence, and all of this is well traced in this book, How Asia Works. I would strongly advise, most of you to read that book. It's very relevant still, because this traces back the economic theoretical origins of Japan, and that goes back to Germany. And that goes back to 1870s, actually, that late, that early. In fact, it was a debate between Adam Smith and German economist Friedrich List. We are all familiar with Adam Smith. Most of us probably are not familiar with List. List developed this school called the National Economic School, what we would consider Swadeshi economics here. And German blueprint was the National List Economic School. At that time, of course, the UK was the industrial power. It was assumed that continental Europe will not develop. And they had, of course, only the Protestant nations can develop. Catholic nations cannot develop, all of those things in Europe at that time. In other words, whenever somebody develops, they think other people cannot develop. In fact, Japan assumed China can never develop. Right? So, and that was much later. So that is the milieu in which the List developed this National Economic School. And the fundamental premise is very simple, and I can speak from a rural Indian perspective. We are at the receiving end of everything. That is, we buy. If I go to town in Tenkasi, I can buy smartphones, motorcycles, latest everything. I can order this online. Everything will be delivered. Actually, in India, delivery reaches the remotest of villages now. The remotest of villages, I can actually have it delivered. Except that we don't generate the income to buy. What's the point that I can buy everything? Where is the income to buy? In other words, we don't have enough to sell. And our farm incomes, our rural incomes are not sufficient to buy all the stuff. That is balanced only 4 ways. I always say it. That is, either you migrate. That's why all the migrants to the big cities. And you see this in Delhi, you see this in Mumbai, in Bangalore, in Chennai, all of that. And then the selling of the assets to pay for to balance the books, or going into debt. And 4th is political freebies. And which, in the global context, that is respectfully termed as universal basic income. But you have to remember, our Indian politicians invented first, so we have to have some respect for that. We call it freebies in India, but it's really universal basic income that in the global context. But it's the same problem. Actually, in America, I witnessed the same problem between, for example, Silicon Valley versus Central Valley. They are only about 70, 80 miles apart. You can go from Silicon Valley to Central Valley in about an hour and a half of drive, when there's not much traffic, easily. Like San Francisco versus Stockton. I lived right in the middle, so I knew both cities. It's a night and day difference economically. In Stockton, there are hardly any jobs. Central Valley was suffering, struggling. And then all of the flyover country, the coast versus the flyover country, as they call in America. And that is what finally resulted in the political earthquake we saw, and that is what is driving all of this. One economist I follow, who actually sits in China but is a Westerner, Michael Pettis, he is a very good person to read about all this. He explains that all of these globally happening, they all have the common cause, which is that technology is now concentrating incomes. A lot of people are at the receiving end of all of that. They have no way to pay for it. And that problem is getting AI. Now I'll come to AI and software. Our industry, I like to say, software, we develop all this while we develop software by hand. It's very much a handicraft industry. There's a reason why I could do rural software development, because it's very much software itself, for all the high-tech sheen you put on it, you are weaving together code by hand. Well, powerful machine looms are coming now. And like weavers, our traditional weavers, there is now a serious risk for software engineers, which we saw this coming about 3-4 years ago. The first advent of ChatGPT. In fact, all of the ChatGPT, all of Gemini, all the use, the most economically productive use today actually is being put to is in software development. Biggest sector it's actually affecting today is software development. And we are seeing ourselves productivity gains from it. But here is a very interesting point. The experienced software engineers are much more productive than the junior engineers. If you look at deeply analyze this, the haves are becoming even bigger haves. The have-nots lose their jobs. That's the structural transition the software industry itself is now starting to witness. Entry-level jobs are being lost, all of that. So this is the imbalance that I talk about in the global context between the technology, that there's people not in technology, is starting to come into the IT industry in the form of very experienced engineers who can use AI to be much more productive versus inexperienced engineers, junior engineers who may not. And in fact, one of my senior engineers put it well to me just 3 days ago. He showed me all the work he's doing. That I would have assigned this work to my junior engineer. He would have taken 3 weeks. I'm getting it done in an hour. So this AI did the 3 weeks work of junior's work in 1 hour. And I am in control of it. So that's really, I witnessed this right in front of me, in our own company. So last 2-3 years, we have not hired that many software engineers. But we are producing more software than ever before. And this is going to be a structural issue over time in the software industry. You're seeing this play out. That means if a lot more software can be produced, either demand keeps up or prices come down. And I don't have to give you the remind, all of us are closet full of clothes, but weavers don't have jobs. This situation is, I want our own engineers. What happened to weavers could happen to software weavers. So it's actually a reality. Then how do we navigate these? I'd say only those who own the powerful looms win in this. Either we are in the powerful loom business or we get commoditized over time. So we are investing in those powerful loom business ourselves. We are investing in those and we have seen some good results. We are actually producing our own tooling for it, for software, as I say, that can help the average engineer to be much more productive or the senior engineer to be more productive. But the economic implication is what I'm going to, because it's a navigating geoeconomics, not only navigating IT. If you are a software consumer, you should expect prices to come down, choices to go up, just like what happened in textiles, all of it. You'll see a lot more software and lower prices over time, or a lot more stuff offered for the same price that you are paying. That I think is a prediction I would make in this. But if you are a software engineer, I'm not so this thing. Even within Silicon Valley, the haves and have-nots have emerged. Even among, for example, Indians in Silicon Valley, distinctions emerged. About a year ago, I was walking down in a park in Cupertino, near very close to Apple's quarters. I was there for a business visit, and there was somebody, a middle-aged person, approached me in the park and said, "I got laid off from one of the big tech companies, and he's Indian, and I haven't found a job, and nobody would hire people like me at my age." And he's not very old. He's only but maybe 45. Still, even 45 is kind of too old for a lot of this. Silicon Valley is rampant for age discrimination. So even among Indians in Silicon Valley, those who have been there 25 years, who are in sort of middling jobs in software, are worried. That's the navigation. On the other hand, you will hear Meta hiring 30-year-old, 25-year-old AI experts for $5 million, $10 million, $20 million. This is again the imbalance I'm talking about. Your average person income is maybe going down, but the highest incomes are going up more rapidly. This is what is driving entirety of both geoeconomics, inevitably geopolitics. Because economics is politics in the end. And even within China, this is something that I posted on X recently, China has a massive surplus of college graduates. China has educated, is sending more of its youth to college than many Western countries now, most Western countries today. And China has the factory for the world. All of us buy everything made in China, right? Yet Chinese factories have labor shortages. Chinese college graduates are going underemployed or unemployed. This is unemployment among college graduates is a serious issue in China. So there is a mismatch between what kind of training people are getting versus what kind of jobs being produced. The factory sector is automating. So China is now a global leader in factory automation now. And they are exporting the surplus goods, of course, to countries like us. This is another geoeconomic imbalance where the Chinese trade surpluses are actually have been increasing even after the American tariffs, because they have found other countries to absorb the surplus. And they don't generate enough domestic demand because their own young people don't have enough well-paying jobs. This is a Chinese imbalance. In other words, they can produce everything several times over. They can supply everyone in the world, but they don't generate the demand. So this is the imbalance that is, you will see this in Indian politics, rural versus urban things you see is the same fundamental economic issue. And I am seeing on the one side, a hotshot AI engineer getting paid very high wages, even, we pay them. And I see school teachers in Tenkasi who are a BSc graduate or something struggling to find a 10,000 rupees, 15,000 rupees a month job. This is the imbalance that we are generating, and this has to be a fundamental rethinking of all of how the geoeconomic principles, and that's what is, I think we are beginning to do. We're in the very early stage. But I can assure you that whatever happened in the last 30, 40 years is not going to keep on running, because the frictions, the imbalances, the political earthquakes will keep happening because the fundamental economics of this is now broken. And you have a mismatch between where the supply is getting created versus who needs to consume all of that supply. And that's what we are seeing. And I'm seeing it within businesses, I'm seeing it within software, I'm seeing it in the globalized level. And I am an optimist. So I say, I'm investing in rural areas, we are creating income, we are described as a large software company out of India, product company out of India, but I'll give you a scale difference. We would be, maybe clearing 2 billion soon, within the next few months, 2 billion annual run rate. Meanwhile, Microsoft would be at about 400 billion run rate. So you see the imbalance, right? And we are the largest in India. The largest in India is 2 billion, and the next largest is not yet a billion, maybe 700 million. Then the third would be like 300 million. Meanwhile, in US, you'll see 400 billion, 350 billion, 400 billion, 300 billion, 200 billion. There will be 5 companies that cross 150 billion in America now. That's the level of imbalance in this industry. And if we hope to be technologically sovereign, we cannot afford not to invest. But even to invest, you require, GPUs, for example. You can easily consume $20 billion in GPUs today. Easily. And how many companies in India have 20 billion lying around on their balance sheet to invest? The balance sheet capacity to invest. So this is the scale we are looking at. But I told you I'm an optimist. Why am I an optimist? A lot of these problems, there's also brain power involved. We do have abundant brain power. That I can assure you. We have abundant brain power. We are tapping it in rural India. So we have to find a way to invent that doesn't necessarily involve the 20 billion investment. Maybe you can do it with 200 million investment. That I believe is possible. That's why I'm being an optimist. But we still, all of these issues, how to create the jobs, all of these have to be addressed. And there is a particular way the Washington consensus taught, which even in America it's dying, I want to tell you. But it died over the 30 years, I saw it. 89 to 2019 is approximately the coincident with the Washington consensus. If you asked me 25 years ago, I myself would have said, okay, Washington consensus may be a good idea. I wasn't aware. But slowly I observed it and I said these imbalances cannot last. Particularly India has to produce all of the software. It's clear. That's why we invested heavily. We have been investing in technology knowing that there won't be any buyer, any taker for at least 5-10 years. And we are still doing it. We are investing in things we know there won't be any takers for 10 years. And because the technology curve is now like this, they used to say hockey stick. Now it's like more like an L shape like this, inverted L shape, where it is zero and then it takes off to infinity. That's the nature of these things now. So it is really a question of how long are you prepared to wait out the zero. Then it takes off. The Chinese are very good at it. Are we very good at it? That is the critical question facing in technology. Because a lot of technologies are like that. Unless we are extremely good, nobody will adopt us over WhatsApp. The extremely good will take the zero until it takes off. That's the investment thesis in every technology. Unless our GPU is extremely good, nobody will adopt it against NVIDIA. The Chinese have produced nearly as good GPUs today. We have not even gotten started much in India yet. So that's an example. And those GPUs determine who controls AI. And who controls AI controls the global economy, increasingly, right? In a lot of these sectors. So that's where we stand. Self-driving cars, Chinese are very good at it now. And Tesla is good at it. Waymo is very good. Where are we yet? We still need those. And then when the self-driving cars happen, what happens to the driver jobs? So many of our youth are in driver jobs. So those are there is a technology question. Do we have the technology? There is an economic question. So this is the landscape we are in. The good news is we have a demographic dividend. We can figure out the answers by investing in the talent pool. That's what I'm doing. But it is not an easy challenge in terms of navigating the full landscape. And it requires a philosophical rethink, which is why I'm doing this. I mentioned the Swadeshi thinking we have to do. What is the economic system going to look like in this world, in this technology world? And I assure you, nobody has figured out the answers yet. Because Sam Altman talked about UBI. Even Sam Altman's preferred answer is, we will have few AI companies that make all the profit. The government will give universal basic income so we can consume. I don't know whether you like the answer or not, but that is his answer. So that's where we are today. And thank you very much. Okay. If we have time, I can take a couple of questions. Otherwise, yeah, please.
Thank you. Hello. Yes, thank you for your talk. It was great listening to you, and especially great to know that you are Swadeshi at heart. But how to make, you're very sensitive as far as Swadeshi is concerned. But how to make Indians more sensitive about Swadeshi? Yeah. My question is that people buy anything and everything without being sensitive to the origin of the product. They want to go out, study in US, work in US and settle there, and never wanting to come back. So how to change this? Because people even sitting here in this room would be having that element of, sensitivity.
So,
thank you.
I'd say there is 22 million plus babies born every year. Maybe 1 million will ever go abroad. Maybe 2. That means 90% will not. So, in that 90%, there ought to be some good talent. That's how I think about it. Meaning, that's why I give the demographic numbers. 22.5 million babies in India. China is only at about 9 million right now. Shocking difference, actually. 22 versus 9. US is about 3.6 million. So we can actually export a full China worth of babies to anybody who wants. Until we'll have more than a China worth of babies here. So, right? So which is why I don't worry about who wants to go abroad, all of those questions, because there's enough here. Everywhere in India. Our birth rates are falling. But Chinese are falling even faster. Right? We will, every year maybe another 200, 300,000, 500,000 is falling. China is dropping at the same rate. They are also at the 9 million, they will lose another 400,000. So it's a race to the bottom demographically now.
My question was more on sentiment rather than statistics.
Yeah, I agree. The sentiment, I tell you, it will only change over time. It's not we have lived a particular worldview. That's why I started with the Washington consensus still in our mind. Even though it's almost dead and buried, we think it's somehow going to resurrect itself. Maybe the US election will change. Somehow we are hoping against hope. But I'm telling you, the fundamentals are never good for it to come back. It's not about, that whether it's a good system or bad system. its outcome, for example, if Washington consensus come back, the US will deindustrialize even more. For example, yesterday, I don't know how many of you saw the news, Ford Motor exited the EV business with a $19.5 billion write-off. Okay? So $19.5 billion hit to the balance sheet for exiting the EV market. Is that a good idea? The Chinese now have excellent EVs at very low price points, including self-driving technology, all of it. They're throwing in at something like $15,000, $20,000. You can buy an excellent Chinese EV that can compete with something much more expensive in the West. And Ford's response is to exit the market. But there's no moat. I mean, I don't think their internal combustion engine is going to save them in 10 years. As the EVs get better, the batteries get better. For example, we are looking at sodium ion batteries. Those will be a lot cheaper. And their power density has caught up. In fact, I was talking to a battery expert just a couple of days ago. Sodium batteries now can do as much density as lithium. And all of this technology means what happens to EVs, right? The batteries will become cheaper, EVs will become cheaper. EVs are a lot simpler cars than internal combustion engine cars. That means you can produce them cheaper, sell them cheaper, all that. And they are exiting that very market. So this is the consequence of their style of thinking. They are still thinking that old way. They are, on the other hand, Tesla, Elon Musk knows that America needs the capacity. He is doubling down. So in a way, Tesla stock jumped on the news because Tesla is now the preeminent EV company for America. At least they have one there, right? The Chinese are, of course, prohibited from selling in America now, so Tesla doesn't have to worry about them. But the loss of capability, right? If they run the Washington consensus, even Tesla will be lost because the Chinese will decimate even Tesla. I think that is the... Similarly, TSMC news, Morris Chang said in a recent interview that his American fabs are not as productive as the Taiwanese fab. Only the taxpayer subsidies will keep the American fab, TSMC fab in Arizona alive. Not, if they let the free market run, TSMC will not produce in America. But America will not allow that to happen. So that free market be damned, Washington consensus be damned, right? They can preach that to us, but they're not taking the medicine anymore. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Fantastic, Mr. Vembu. Sir, I'm sorry, I know the audience wants to ask a couple of questions, but we're absolutely out of time.
Thank you.
But thank you so much,
Thank you,
Mr.
thank
Vembu.
you.
Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Sir, for that beautifully insightful session from the heart. It was really great to hear Sir today.